Today's episode is sponsored by Dashlane. You've probably heard of identity protection, password managers, and VPNs, but do you have them? Are you using them? Well, you should be. And the best way to do that is with Dashlane, which is a one-stop shop for all of your digital identity protection needs. If all of your passwords are the same, I know a lot of us do it, but it's a really bad idea. You can use Dashlane's password manager to create and securely store complex and unique passwords, making it less likely that your accounts are going to be compromised. They also have a VPN as part of their service, meaning that you can browse the internet securely and confidently, even on public Wi-Fi. But not just that, they also actively monitor the dark web to see if your information has been leaked somewhere. That means that you can go in and change your passwords before someone breaks into other accounts that share that same password. Plus, Dashlane does what it's always done. It stores your passwords, it keeps your personal data secure, it fills all of those annoying boxes asking for payment info or passwords for you. A lot of Dashlane is free, but there are some premium upgrades you can buy if you want more from the service. To see if those are right for you, you can take a 30-day free trial, and after that get 10% off using our code TodayIFoundOut at dashlane.com/TodayIFoundOut. And let's get into today's video. Well, we're answering a question today because Asa K asks us, what happens if people are accidentally declared dead, and how do they prove that they're alive? As with most legal matters, answering the question of what exactly happens when a person is accidentally declared dead varies from country to country, although curiously, from our research, with some exceptions like a few instances we found in Canada particularly, it seems as if the United States is one of the few countries where the aftermath of this can be long-term devastating for the unlucky individual, even after they are declared alive again. But to start with, how exactly does one actually get accidentally declared dead in the first place? Well, it turns out that in pretty much every nation, most of the time it's simply due to clerical error. In modern times, this usually just means a typo or something like that. So yes, particularly for you US citizens watching this video, go ahead and think about how your life could be ruined, or at least a good portion of it, by a simple typo made by a random person at any given moment. On that note, although exact figures are hard to come by, it's estimated by the Social Security Administration that in the United States, some 7,000 to 14,000 people are accidentally declared dead every year. Numbers from other nations were seemingly impossible to come by, but we did at least dig out that in Canada from 2007 to 2013, there were approximately 5,500 people accidentally declared dead, or an average of about 900 people per year. Given that the United States has approximately 9 times as many people as Canada, this would put the equivalent number at about 8,000 people per year, so right in line with the low-end estimate of the US numbers. Okay, so a misplaced finger by a worker at a funeral home, a hospital, etc. has now accidentally killed you as far as the government is concerned, so how do you fix it? Well, it turns out that pretty much everywhere we looked at, in theory, this is as simple as walking into the appropriate government office and letting the fact that you just walked into a government office speak for itself. Of course, you'll also have to provide some identification to show that you are who you say you are. For example, in the United States, you just need to visit your local Social Security Administration office with one piece of appropriate picture ID, such as a driver's license, passport, etc., and inform them of the mistake in their records. And indeed, in reports of this happening to people in several different nations we looked at, this seems to more or less clear the matter up within a few weeks. Certainly, these few weeks can be a bit traumatizing and make things difficult in a variety of ways, as we're going to get into in a bit. The most outrageous report we could find from Sweden, for example, simply noted that the 47-year-old Swedish woman was inconvenienced by having to spend several hours unblocking various accounts after the government agency dutifully apologized for the mistake and had corrected it in their system. For her trouble, she was awarded 20,500 kronas, about $2,200. Now let's move on to the United States. Owing to a quirk of the way the Death Master File works and the way various entities use it, as well as previous to a few years ago, the fact that it was available for anyone who wanted to buy it, let's just say that things are a bit more complicated, even though getting declared alive again is actually relatively straightforward, as we described earlier. But before we go any further, we should probably talk a bit about what this Death Master File actually is. Various nations have their own ways of tracking this and rules and regulations that govern such a dataset. But it mostly just comes down to a file maintained by some branch of the government that gets names added to it via reports from various groups or people about a death. In Britain, for instance, a name can be added by anyone simply by going to the appropriate government website and noting a death, as well as providing appropriate proof of death, such as a copy of a death certificate. Other sources that don't necessarily have to include proof of death include reports from places like funeral homes, hospitals, and other such institutions. As you can imagine from all of this, there is more than a little room for accidental error here, given the wide variety of sources this information is being collected from, and with little in the way of verification occurring as to the accuracy of everything coming in. In essence, these types of systems are fairly rife for the occasional typo to pop up and for no one to notice until the accidentally declared dead person finds out themselves. This all brings us around to the United States Social Security Administration Death Master File. It turns out this was never meant to be used as a definitive record of deaths. It was originally put in place in 1936 as a way for the Social Security Administration to help make sure that they weren't paying out benefits to people who were no longer alive, and also for other internal uses. In fact, the Social Security Administration explicitly notes that this data should not be used as a definitive record of who is alive and who is dead in the United States. As the Inspector General of the Social Security Administration in 2015, Patrick P. Carroll Jr. stated before Congress, SSA does not receive death information for all individuals, thus SSA does not guarantee the death master file's completeness. Nevertheless, as with the Social Security number itself, this eventually got co-opted by various groups who needed a reasonably accurate dataset of who was alive and who was not. Now, this all brings us around to why being accidentally declared dead can be quite so devastating to an individual. It turns out that this data is used by many companies, most pertinent to the topic at hand being financial institutions and agencies doling out various benefits like retirement and those such things. Once the death database is updated, this information percolates out to all of these institutions automatically, and then, even worse, from there it percolates out to other institutions who don't use the death master file directly but buy or share information with institutions that do. So to begin with, upon death, all government benefits you may have been entitled to, from Social Security to a government pension, just will be stopped. While this may or may not be an immediate problem for a given person, it turns out that as soon as you're declared dead, it's entirely possible that your bank accounts, credit cards, and the like will all get frozen, and any attempts to retrieve money from them will be flagged as fraud. Depending on the institution, there may or may not be issues accessing joint accounts that you hold as well. On top of this, upon notification of the passing, everyone you owe money to will suddenly be able to claim that money from your estate. On the plus side, if you're married at the time you're declared accidentally dead, if you've got a life insurance policy, your spouse will be able to claim on that policy if they're the person you named as the beneficiary. Unfortunately, this money will then later be expected to be paid back once you're proved to be alive, so it's not really a great perk after all. Being dead, of course, you can also expect that you may end up losing your job, as it's kind of hard to employ a dead person officially. On that note, you'll also find it exceptionally difficult to find work during your time as a legally dead person. At best, you'll have to work for cash under the table. It's also important to note in all of this that it's not uncommon at all for you to be suspected of identity theft and possibly even get arrested, which will also come with a whole host of problems when the police try to enter your details into the system to process you. Speaking of being arrested for stealing your own identity, from 1980 to 2013, thanks to a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit, the Death Master File in the US was publicly accessible to anyone who wanted to pay the fee to the Department of Commerce's National Technical Information Service. The file includes the person's name, date of birth, date of death, social security number, whether death is verified or a death certificate documented, and up until 2011 also included the last known zip code and zip code where any death benefit was sent. This made it all ridiculously easy for actual identity thieves to work their magic and try to get away with all sorts of shenanigans in your name, with the immediate few weeks after you're declared dead being highly targeted, as not every system, and maybe not you yourself, are aware that you've been declared dead. Thus, if you were one of those unlucky individuals, when you once again get declared alive, you've got to go and deal with the identity thief who managed to tarnish your good name while you were dead. Today, in an attempt to stop the identity theft problem for the dead or accidentally declared dead, only approved institutions have immediate access to the current Death Master File, with a 3-year waiting period before the public get access to the new information. This brings us around to another systemic problem with the way that the system works in the US, and that's the way the file is updated, or not updated in some cases. The version of the Death Master File that is downloadable is updated weekly, but only the last 6 revisions can be downloaded directly, and if you want to go any further back than that for the full list, then you have have to order a copy that's loaded onto a CD. The problem here is that if the institution updates irregularly, they might completely miss the revision that you were actually declared alive again, with this marked in the file as a D, indicating that your record should be deleted from any copies of the database stored by these various institutions. Miss that revision, and your name will remain in these systems' databases. On top of that, many institutions that don't use the death master file do buy and share such information from other institutions who may, for a time, have the erroneous information. Thus, it may simply be up to you in all of these types of cases to prove to them that you're once again alive, officially. And again, do expect when you're doing so that they'll suspect you of being an identity thief because of how relatively common identity theft of the dead is. Also, even if you do manage to convince the world that you're alive, there's always the chance that someone, somewhere, will get their hands on an outdated version of the death master file and accidentally kill you again in whatever system they use, which might in turn get shared around even further, even potentially to institutions that you've already proved to that you're still alive. Then you have to go back and prove to them again. For some people who've had this happen, they note that it can be like a game of whack-a-mole for several years. To be fair, it's noted that, much like in most countries we looked at, once you've satisfactorily proven to the Social Security Administration you're indeed still alive, it generally only takes a few weeks at most to make the fix in their database, though there are exceptions where it sometimes takes a bit longer. Further, the Social Security Administration will then issue you with an erroneous death case third-party contact, which you can use as proof that you're not actually dead and that you're not an identity thief. The real problem here, of course, is that identity thieves are good at forging things, leading some institutions to be rather skeptical. If this happens, you're advised to contact the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to speak to the institution on your behalf. Alternatively, you can contact your local congressional representative's constituent services office if you want to circumvent all of the red tape and have the problem addressed directly, though your mileage with this may vary. As for how long it takes to correct the mistake in the United States, there's no definitive answer. Indeed, there are cases of people fighting for years with various institutions trying to prove that they're still alive. A notable case is that of Judy Rivers, who spent 7 years dealing with the ramifications of being accidentally declared dead. Rivers had over $80,000 in her bank account, a good career, but upon being declared dead, she became basically financially destitute. She also lost her job and her house. In her own words to the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, who were looking into ways that the system might be fixed, she stated, "I could not have imagined that I would reach the point of hopelessness, homelessness, loss of reputation and credibility, unable to obtain a job, an apartment, a student loan, or even a cell phone." Suspected as being an identity thief by nearly every apartment manager or human resource director I encountered became a way of life. Each time I got into my car, I was panic-stricken that the police would stop me and I would have to try and prove my identity. Another example is that of retired Army drill sergeant Jerry Miller, who was accidentally declared dead 4 times, each time resulting in him having his veterans' benefits and governmental pensions stopped. And no, he wasn't the random victim of an unfortunate typo 4 times in a row. That just happened once. His case was one where there was an old copy of the death master file getting passed around, and he just kept getting declared dead again over and over again by the US Department of Veterans Affairs. Each time he'd prove he was alive, things would be fine for a while, and then he'd end up getting declared dead again. Miller almost lost his house, suffered failing health when he was unable to get needed prescriptions, and received a letter asking him to pay back around $94,000 worth of benefit checks he'd supposedly fraudulently cashed while previously being dead. Of course, he was very much alive and entitled to those checks, but was now in a bit of legal hot water over the matter. Perhaps most bizarre of all, though, is the case of Donald Miller Jr., whose request to be declared legally alive was turned down by a judge. This was not, however, a case of a typo, but rather a case of a disappearance. In a nutshell, Miller disappeared from his Ohio home sometime in 1994. After an investigation, Miller was declared dead in absentia. His life insurance policy was paid out and his social security number was retired. In 2005, Miller resurfaced and revealed that he had fled because he owed around $26,000 in child support to his ex-wife and he couldn't afford it. Unaware he had died, Miller tried to have the decision overturned so that he could get a driver's license after having got his life back together, only to have the decision challenged by his ex-wife. It would later turn out that Miller's ex-wife couldn't afford to pay back the life insurance settlement that she had received as a result of his death, and that him staying dead would allow her to avoid doing so. When the case went to court, because of various quirks of the law, a judge was forced to rule that Miller had left it too long to challenge the decision, despite his contention that he didn't know he'd died. So yes, the judge in this case, knowing Miller was who he claimed to be and was literally standing in front of him, ordered him legally dead anyway. So yes, in short, if you live anywhere and are accidentally declared dead by your government, expect the next month or two to be a bit of a living hell. But as far as we can find, this usually gets cleared up pretty quickly. But if you live in the United States just because of some quirks about how the system works there, as one Liz Weston of the Denver Post aptly noted, if the Social Security Administration thinks you're dead, you might wish you were. So I really hope you found that video interesting. Don't forget to check out our appropriate sponsor for today, Dashlane, in the description below. And as always, thank you for watching.